She doesn't chase. She doesn't beg. She doesn't compete. And yet, high-value men notice her. They remember her. They lean in. They pursue. Not because she's perfect. Not because she plays games. But because there's something about her that feels dangerous to ignore. There's a shadow in her softness. A quiet fire behind her eyes. A storm beneath her silence. And if you're honest, you've felt that kind of woman before, maybe once in your life. Maybe never, but you haven't forgotten her. She's not the loudest in the room. She's not performing femininity like a script. She's not trying to be chosen, because she already knows in her body, in her bones, that she is the prize. But here's the truth you might not want to hear. That kind of woman, she had to earn that presence. She wasn't born magnetic. She became it. After heartbreaks cracked her open, after betrayals made her bleed, after being the one who gave everything and was left with nothing. She learned the hard way. That being the good girl doesn't get you love, it gets you abandoned. That shrinking to fit someone else's comfort only ends with you choking on your own silence. That pleasing is not power. So she stopped. She stopped explaining herself. She stopped overgiving. She stopped trying to fix men who were terrified of their own truth. She let parts of her die, parts that were never hers to carry, and what rose in their place was her shadow. The feminine shadow. The part of her that doesn't beg to be seen. The part that doesn't make herself small for anyone's validation. The part that holds mystery, boundaries, raw self-respect. This isn't some mask. It's not an act. It's not about seduction games or tactics. This is about energy, essence, depth. And the deeper she went into her own darkness, the deeper men wanted to follow her. Not because she lured them in, but because she became irresistible to those ready to meet her there. This video is for the woman who is tired of being too much and still not enough. The woman who's held space for everyone else and is finally ready to hold space for herself. For the woman who wants love, yes, but not at the price of her soul. And for the men listening, this might explain the woman you couldn't hold, the one you couldn't forget. And maybe, just maybe, the one you're finally ready for now. So breathe, sink in, and if something stirs inside you as you listen, don't ignore it. That's your own shadow calling you home. If this speaks to you already, if your body feels that this is something you were meant to hear, subscribe, like, stay close. We're just getting started. She was the kind of woman who used to overthink every text. Did I sound too needy? Should I have waited longer to reply? Will this push him away? She thought that caring too much was her curse. That if she could just care a little less, she might finally be the one who gets chosen. The one who's pursued. The one who isn't left behind. So she dimmed her heart. She played it cool. She read all the right books, memorized all the right rules, followed all the unspoken strategies. But no matter how perfectly she performed, she always ended up the same way, exhausted and alone. Because it wasn't about how she texted. It wasn't about timing or tone or what emoji she used. It was about the wound behind the words. That invisible ache that whispered, "Love me. Please love me. I'll do anything to be loved." And high-value men, conscious men, self-respecting men feel that wound, even if it's unspoken. Even if it's buried beneath flirtation, sex appeal, or self-help wisdom. They feel when a woman is performing safety instead of embodying it. So they pull back, not because she isn't beautiful, but because something in her feels like obligation, not inspiration. They feel the weight of her unmet childhood hunger. And if they're not wounded themselves, they won't sign up to be her savior. This is the part that no one talks about. That real feminine magnetism isn't about softness or sweetness. It's not about how pretty your photos are or how mysterious your texts feel. It's about how deeply you've sat with the part of you that doesn't feel lovable without proving something. The feminine shadow is born in the moment you stop performing worth and start becoming it. It's in the moment when you realize, I am no longer begging to be understood. I am no longer twisting myself into a shape someone else finds comfortable. I am no longer abandoning myself for a seat at a table I don't even like. That's when everything shifts. She doesn't text to get a response, she texts when it's true. She doesn't analyze what he said, she feels how it landed. She doesn't chase closure, she gives it to herself. And here's what's wild. The moment she chooses herself, not with bitterness, Not with vengeance, but with quiet certainty. Something changes in the air around her. High-value men, attuned men, suddenly notice her. They can't name it, but they feel it. That energy, that sovereignty, that calm, unapologetic, magnetic presence. They feel the woman who is not trying to be wanted. She simply is. She's stopped outsourcing her worth to whether or not someone texts her back. She's stopped making her nervous system a playground for emotionally unavailable men. She's done asking, "What did I do wrong?" And she starts asking something more powerful. Where did I abandon myself in this dynamic? Because the woman who carries her shadow with grace doesn't just attract men, she filters them. She is not impressed by attention. She is not moved by effort alone. She feels beyond the mask. She listens beyond the charm. And if your energy carries manipulation, fragility, or fear, she sees it before you even speak. And still, she won't punish you for it. She simply won't move closer, because she doesn't want to be saved. She's already done the saving. What she wants is resonance. And that is something only a man who has met his own shadow can offer. She used to confuse presence with pressure. She thought being feminine meant being soft at all times. Patient, smiling, always available, always understanding. She thought it meant giving endless second chances, not reacting, not needing, not making waves. But deep down, that wasn't femininity. That was fear. Fear of being abandoned, fear of being too much, fear of being rejected for having boundaries. So she became the cool girl, the easy girl, the one who never asked for more than what was given. And inside, she was dying. Dying of overthinking every interaction. Dying of accepting crumbs and calling it a feast. Dying of holding back her truth because she didn't want to ruin the vibe. Until one day, something broke. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. Not because she looked different, but because she had spent so long performing connection. She forgot what real intimacy even felt like. That was the day she stopped choosing peace over truth. She stopped smiling when something felt off. She stopped shrinking her voice. She stopped over-explaining her feelings just to seem reasonable. And when she did that, when she made room for her anger, her sadness, her needs, her intuition, something unexpected happened. She felt more feminine than ever before. Not because she was pleasant, but because she was finally whole. This is the paradox. The more you allow your darkness, the more light you carry. The more you own your edges, the more grace you embody. The more honest you are with yourself, the more magnetic you become to those who can meet you there. That's the feminine shadow. She doesn't perform peace. She is peace because she no longer betrays herself. She doesn't avoid conflict. She welcomes it if it's in service of truth. She doesn't suppress her rage. She holds it with reverence. Because that rage, it's sacred. It tells her where her boundaries were crossed, where her inner child wasn't protected, where she stayed too long, hoping someone would change. So she listens now, not to her fear, but to her body, her breath, her pulse, the signals that don't lie. She doesn't need to test men. She doesn't play hot and cold. She's not calculating responses or controlling outcomes. She simply watches. And if a man shows up with sincerity, with presence, with honesty, she opens. Slowly, deliberately, from a place of power, not panic. And if he doesn't, she doesn't cling. She doesn't spiral. She doesn't chase the version of him she made up in her head. She lets him go. Not because she doesn't care, but because she finally cares more about herself. That level of embodiment, that's what high-value men crave. Not perfection, not performance, not passivity, but a woman who has faced herself, loved herself, chosen herself. A woman who doesn't punish men for leaving but also doesn't tolerate breadcrumbs. A woman who doesn't need to be worshipped but also refuses to be overlooked. This is what makes her unforgettable. Not just to men, but to herself. She used to think that love meant staying loyal, staying silent, staying patient, even when it hurt, even when she was starving for reciprocity, even when her body whispered, "This is not it." She mistook endurance for devotion. But that kind of staying wasn't love, it was survival. It was the little girl inside her, still hoping that if she just tried harder, loved harder, gave more, someone would finally choose her, finally stay, finally see her as enough. And so she tolerated inconsistency. She justified disrespect. She called it chemistry. She called it fate. She said things like, "We have a deep connection," when in truth she had a deep wound. Until one day, she looked around and realized something terrifying. She was the only one fighting for the relationship. She was having conversations alone, healing alone, hoping alone. She had turned into the emotional engine for two people, and it was killing her spirit. That's when something inside her snapped, not in rage, but in clarity. She realized she was keeping men who didn't even want to be kept. She realized she was more loyal to a dream than to her own reality. She realized she was confusing intensity for intimacy. And she walked away, not with bitterness, but with grace. Because by then, she had learned, the most dangerous thing a woman can do is keep choosing people who keep choosing their comfort over her truth. And when she left, she didn't just leave him, she left the pattern of begging for crumbs, the pattern of silencing her needs, the pattern of blaming herself for someone else's inability to love deeply. That was the moment she became different. Not harder, not colder, but cleaner. Cleaner in her energy, cleaner in her boundaries, cleaner in what she was available for. She no longer tried to prove her worth, she simply embodied it. She no longer explained her value, she let her energy speak for itself. She no longer played small to keep the peace, because she realized peace without truth is just another form of self-abandonment. And that shift? That's what men feel. Even if she doesn't say a word, her energy tells them everything. It says, "I will not teach you how to treat me. I will not mother you through emotional immaturity. I will not sacrifice my soul just to say I have someone." And here's the secret most won't tell you. Men who are ready, truly ready, love that energy. Because the man who has done his own work isn't afraid of a woman with power. He's not intimidated by her depth. He doesn't flinch at her truth. He finds it erotic, not just sexually but spiritually, because it awakens something in him. It calls him forward. It challenges him to meet her, not with performance, but with presence. He stops playing games. He stops disappearing. He stops wearing masks. Because her energy makes him remember who he is. That's the difference between seduction and resonance. Seduction makes a man chase. Resonance makes him rise. And that, more than anything, is what the feminine shadow unlocks. She never needed to be perfect. She just needed to be honest. But no one taught her that. They taught her to be nice, to be sweet, to be small, to make herself appealing, to never rock the boat, to confuse love with approval, to say it's fine even when her soul was screaming inside. So that's what she did. She smiled when she wanted to scream. She said okay when she meant no. She kept forgiving him not because he deserved it, but because she didn't believe she deserved better. And slowly, without realizing, she abandoned herself, bit by bit, choice by choice, until there was barely any her left in the mirror, just a hollow echo of who she used to be, wearing the mask of everything's okay. But she wasn't okay, and it took being ghosted by someone she thought loved her. It took crying on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m. again. It took listening to her own voice tremble as she explained herself to someone who didn't even want to understand. That's what finally broke the spell. Not because the pain ended, but because the pain became louder than her need to pretend. That's the moment the feminine shadow entered, not as anger, but as truth, as the voice that said, "You're allowed to leave. You're allowed to stop holding everything together. You're allowed to want more." And when she listened, really listened, something ancient unlocked inside her. She realized she didn't want love that she had to chase. She didn't want conversations where she had to twist her words into softness just to be heard. She didn't want to attract a man. She wanted to see him and be seen. And only a man who had faced his own darkness could do that. So she let go of the boys who couldn't hold depth. She stopped explaining herself to those who only wanted the version of her that didn't make them uncomfortable. She stopped molding herself into someone digestible. She started honoring the parts of her that were too wild, too sensitive, too real for people who only knew how to love through control. That's when men started looking at her differently. They didn't know why. They couldn't explain it. But they felt something around her. Something unnameable. Something rare. It wasn't just beauty. It wasn't just confidence. It was the unmistakable frequency of a woman who is no longer asking for permission to exist. That kind of energy, it doesn't beg, it doesn't apologize, it doesn't chase, it chooses. And that changes everything. Because now, love doesn't feel like something she has to win. It feels like something she allows. And the moment she stopped trying to be what every man wanted, she became what no man could forget. It's not that she stopped wanting love. It's that she stopped needing it to validate her. She still craves intimacy, still aches to be held, still wants the warmth of connection, but not at the cost of her center, not at the cost of betraying her own gut just to keep someone from leaving. She stopped confusing anxiety with chemistry, stopped calling heartbreak growth, stopped seeing men as projects to heal or puzzles to solve. She started seeing herself. And with that, everything shifted. Because when a woman sees herself, really sees herself, she becomes the mirror that no man can look away from. Not because she flatters his ego, but because she reflects his truth. And here's what most don't realize. The feminine shadow doesn't punish. She doesn't manipulate. She doesn't destroy. She reveals. She reveals the places in him where he's still hiding, still running, still playing small, still outsourcing his worth to performance or power or approval. And only the brave stay. Only the man who has looked his own shadow in the eye can look her in the eye and not flinch. Because her energy, her groundedness, her stillness, it undresses him. Not physically, spiritually. She doesn't need to say much. Her silence says everything. It says, I am not here to fix you. I am not here to fill your emptiness. I am not here to perform for your comfort. And yet if you come with honesty, if you come with presence, if you come without a mask, she will see you. She will meet you. She will give you access to depths you didn't know existed, but only if you've earned it. That's the part most people misunderstand about feminine magnetism. It's not about charm. It's not about tricks. It's not about being nice. It's about capacity. Can you hold her silence without trying to fill it? Can you sit in her fire without needing to tame it? Can you love her and let her be free? Because she is not the kind of woman who wants to be owned. She wants to be met. And meeting her requires more than confidence, more than charisma. It requires devotion, not to her, to your own truth, to your own healing, to your own wholeness. Because when a man becomes sovereign within himself, he doesn't chase, he chooses. And she feels the difference. She knows when a man is anchored, when his presence isn't a performance, but a pulse. When his masculinity doesn't come from dominance but from depth. That's when she opens. Not quickly, not recklessly, but fully. Because the feminine shadow may hold mystery, but once she trusts you, she gives. She gives her softness, her insight, her body, her care, her power. And it's not a performance. It's a gift, one that only the worthy receive. There was a time when she thought her softness was a liability. That if she loved too openly, she'd be left exposed. That if she cared too deeply, she'd become disposable. That if she gave too much of herself, there would be nothing left to hold on to when they left. Because they always left. And for a while, that belief made her hard. Not on the surface, she still smiled, still laughed, still went on dates, but something inside her had closed. She didn't trust anyone to stay. And worse, she didn't trust herself to walk away. So she stayed too long with people who dimmed her light. She tolerated half-love and sweet lies. She convinced herself that moments of connection were enough to justify months of confusion. But no more. She doesn't abandon herself for flashes of attention anymore. She no longer makes excuses for inconsistency. She no longer calls chaos passion, because now she knows the difference between love and trauma bonding. Between a man who wants to see her and a man who wants to consume her. She knows what it feels like to be chosen for her light and her darkness. And that is what she holds out for now. A man who isn't afraid of the parts she once tried to hide. A man who doesn't shrink when she's quiet, doesn't run when she's triggered, doesn't flinch when she tells the truth. Because the feminine shadow, in her fullness, does not pretend. She doesn't put on a mask to be palatable. She doesn't play dumb to stroke a fragile ego. She doesn't flirt to keep someone's interest. She simply is. And the man who's truly embodied won't just admire that, he'll honor it. because it takes a man rooted in his masculine heart to stand still in the face of a woman's storm, to not try to fix her, or quiet her, or control her, but to feel her, to witness her, to be with her, not above her, not over her, with her, side by side. And that's the kind of love she's ready for now. The kind that doesn't ask her to sacrifice her power for connection. The kind that doesn't make her choose between being understood and being desired. The kind that can hold her softness because it can hold her fire. And she's not in a rush, because she's not waiting for him to complete her. She's already whole, already home in herself. Already magnetic, not because she's trying to be, but because her presence speaks louder than performance ever could. So when that man comes, and he will, she won't fall into him. She'll rise beside him. The women who rise beside men like that, they don't just love differently. They live differently. They walk into rooms without needing to be seen, and still eyes find them. They speak slowly, intentionally, not to impress, but to connect. Their silence carries more weight than someone else's shout. Because there's nothing to prove when you finally believe you're enough. They're not driven by attention anymore, not aching to be chosen, not desperate to be claimed, because they've already claimed themselves. And that kind of woman, she doesn't chase love, she attracts alignment. Not everyone will feel it, not everyone will understand it. That's the point. Her presence is not for the masses. It's for the man who sees through the noise, who isn't fooled by filters, who senses her frequency like a familiar chord he hasn't heard in years. A man like that doesn't play games. He doesn't breadcrumb. He doesn't fumble her softness. He steps in. He listens. He learns. He leans into the discomfort of growth because he'd rather evolve than lose her. Because he knows she's not the woman you get through effort alone. She's the woman you earn through self-responsibility. And if you're the man listening now, wondering why the women you want always seem just out of reach, let this land. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you're ready for. You want a woman who embodies her shadow. Then meet yours. Sit with the part of you that hides behind achievement, that clings to control, that equates vulnerability with weakness, that runs from emotion because you were never taught how to feel. Sit with the boy inside who was shamed for crying, who was praised for winning but never held in failure, who learned to seek power because connection felt too unsafe. Meet him, and your energy will change. And when it does, you'll stop chasing women who don't see you. You'll stop needing to impress. You'll stop confusing validation with value. Because now, you'll know who you are. And so will she. There's no shortcut here. No hack. No secret line or tactic. Just presence. Just depth. Just two people no longer trying to fill their emptiness with each other, but meeting from a place of overflow. That's what real union is. Not a transaction. Not a fantasy. But a mirror. A trigger. A teacher. A sanctuary. And when it happens, when you feel it, it will feel terrifyingly calm. Like coming home to a place you've never been. Like remembering a language your soul never forgot. Like love, but finally true. They won't understand how she got here. They'll think she was always this confident, this clear, this calm. But they didn't see the nights she stayed awake, replaying every word, wondering what she did wrong. They didn't hear the silence after being ghosted. They didn't feel the hollowness of giving her all, only to be forgotten. She was the girl who over-apologized. The girl who second-guessed her worth depending on someone else's attention. The girl who mistook being chosen for being loved. But over time, she started asking harder questions. Why was she always chasing? Why did she feel addicted to people who made her anxious? Why did calm love feel boring and chaos feel like home? The answers didn't come in one lightning bolt moment. They came slowly through journaling, through therapy, through sitting in the ache instead of trying to numb it, through seeing that the pattern wasn't just about them. It was about her. What she believed she was worthy of. What she believed love had to cost. And when that truth cracked her open, it hurt deeply. Because she saw it. She was abandoning herself, over and over, just to feel temporarily safe in someone else's arms. And so, she began the slowest, most sacred work of all, reclaiming herself. She started speaking up even when her voice shook. She started setting boundaries, even when it made people uncomfortable. She started staying true to her body's signals, instead of overriding them for the sake of being easy to love. And little by little, her energy changed. The same men who once took her for granted and felt intimidated now. They couldn't toy with her like before. They couldn't feed her false promises and expect her to stay. She had become unavailable for the patterns that once ruled her life. Not out of spite, out of self-respect. And new men began to appear, men who didn't feel like adrenaline, who didn't trigger her nervous system into fight or flight, who didn't create roller coasters. At first, it felt foreign, even dull. But then she realized it wasn't dull. It was stable. It was safe. It was stillness after the storm. And when that man came along, he didn't try to rush her. He didn't push for more than she could give. He stayed, present, grounded. He didn't need her to shrink. He didn't confuse her depth with drama. He didn't make her prove anything. He just saw her, all of her, and she saw him, because now she wasn't looking for someone to rescue her. She was looking for someone who had rescued themselves. And that made all the difference. There's a softness in her now that's different. Not the kind that bends to please or says yes to avoid conflict. Not the kind that fears being alone, so it clings to whoever stays the longest. This softness is earned. It's the softness of a woman who has faced herself and stayed, who has held her broken pieces without shame, who has loved her own scars until they became sacred. She doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. She doesn't need to convince anyone she's worth it, because now her power lives in her presence. And that presence, it changes rooms. It disarms egos. It exposes games. It invites depth. It pulls forward only those ready to meet her in truth. And the men who once overlooked her, they feel it now. They scroll past her photos and pause longer than they should. They remember the way her silence felt like a mirror, the way her eyes held a challenge and a comfort at once, the way she walked away not to punish, but to protect her peace. They realize, far too late, that she was never asking for too much. She was just asking for the real thing. And that's why high-value men chase her now, not because she tries to be chased, but because her energy speaks to something ancient in them. Something raw, something real. They don't just want her beauty, they want her presence. They want her stillness, her sharp perception, her warmth that doesn't come cheap, her wildness that doesn't perform. But she doesn't say yes just because they show up. She watches, she waits, she listens to her own body. Not from fear, but from discernment. Because love is no longer a gamble. It's a choice. And she will choose the man who doesn't just admire her fire, but honors it. The man who doesn't flinch when she brings truth to the table. Who doesn't retreat when she cries. Who doesn't shrink when she shines. Because she will not apologize for being both soft and strong, wounded and wise, open and utterly unavailable to anything that requires her to betray herself again. That is the feminine shadow. Not darkness that destroys, but darkness that defines. The quiet storm that high-value men can't forget. The mystery they don't want to solve, only hold. The woman they don't just chase, but rise to meet. You don't become her by reading more, or trying harder, or pretending. You become her by returning to yourself, by listening to what you've been taught to silence, by honoring what makes you powerful even when it's messy. Even when it scares you, even when it means walking away from what almost felt like love. This isn't the end of the story. It's the return to the one that was always yours. Thank you for listening. If this moved something inside you, if it made you feel seen or safe or less alone, don't keep that to yourself. Share it. Subscribe. Leave a word, a whisper, a reflection in the comments. Let this be a place where your softness is sacred, where your truth is welcome, where you don't have to hide to be loved.